Hello, and welcome back to the Taste Buds podcast, everybody. Thank you for joining us today.
We are back and really, really excited because we have a special guest on today.
Our first Taste Buds guest.
Woo! April, why don't you do the big introduction just because you're more familiar?
This is a lot of pressure. I want to do our guest right.
Well, it better be good. It better be good.
Yeah. If not, you can refer to our Instagram post. We'll have her full bio on there. So our wonderful guest is another dietitian. Her and I go way back, all the way to undergrad. She's an amazing dietitian. She focuses on pediatric nutrition. So it's going to be super interesting to get her perspective because she is so focused on a specific niche. So we're really excited to have her and her expertise. She's going to hang out with us today, lend her expertise for the recipe segment, the research segment, and answer all of your burning Q&As about anything and everything in regards to nutrition and pediatrics. So welcome, Katherine. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you, guys. I'm so excited to be here. I know this is my first podcast, so I'm just like learning new things with technology, and I'm excited and I'm nervous. And
you're doing amazing so far, and I'm just so excited too. It's going to be great.
Me too. It's going to be awesome. How's everyone doing this week, by the way? Everyone doing good, making it through?
I feel like this week has been one of those weeks. So it's been like super busy, but also like very, very productive. So I'm very tired, but it's been like it's a good tired, you know?
Yeah, that's good. How are you doing, Katherine?
So this week, Kelsey, I was telling April this. I am training a new dietitian. So I have someone like right next to my shoulder for a lot of the day. We're in, masks and everything. But anyway, it makes me really nervous when I'm typing and someone's right there. So I was telling April, I can't spell any of the words I always spell.
Oh,
so
no.
Protein, like the word protein, I got wrong probably 500 times today. I cannot type. So my brain and my hands are not connected. So I've been working on getting the connection back.
I feel yeah. Have you ever been on like a Zoom call and you're trying to type while you're sharing your screen? That is
scary.
That one gets me.
Like major stress.
Major stress for sure.
Yeah. I lose all my spelling capability.
Oh, completely. I've also got some interns at the moment and it's very fun. They're very, very cute. But at the same time, because we work remotely, they're like, hey, I did my whatever hours. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, okay, you need things to do. So we just have catch-up calls. I'm like, okay, well, write this email for a client that you can't refer them to somewhere. There you go.
When in doubt, handouts. There are a million handouts you can always use.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. I feel like I share my screen with patients like 100 times a day. It's all I do all day for all of my video patients. So I would say I'm good at that. I'm not good at typing or spelling today, apparently, but I can share my screen.
It's the E and the I. In the English language, they just like to make things difficult. I couldn't figure out how to spell acknowledge today. Like I had to sit back in my chair and I forced myself to not Google it because I was like, April, you know how to spell acknowledge. And then it came to me, but it took me like 15 to 30 seconds to like sitting here like this, just like thinking about it. Katherine, do you want to give us like an introduction, a little bio?
Yeah.
Plug yourself. What do you do? Tell the audience before we dive in to the episode. Tell them about yourself and how wonderful you are.
So I work, how wonderful I am. Oh, I can go on for hours. I am, like April and Kelsey said, I'm a pediatric specific dietitian. So I see babies, I see toddlers, I see kids, I see teens, and I work on a range of things with the population. So I work primarily in just kind of like an outpatient setting. So I've worked in ambulatory outpatient. I've worked in feeding team settings. I see in-person patients. I see virtual patients. I work at a local children's hospital, and I also run a virtual private practice. So I just get to see lots and lots of families and lots of kiddos. Amazing. It's so fun. And kind of like my areas of like specialty or my areas of interest are disordered eating, eating disorders, just like the whole kind of infancy and starting solids. And of course, picky eating, which is one of my favorite topics ever.
What is your favorite part about private practice?
I love the flexibility that it gives me to like really dive into patient care.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I feel like in hospitals there's just so many like policies and it's a different structure, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So in private practice, I feel like I really get to like work with families.
Yeah, I love that. That's so exciting. Well, I'm so excited to have you on our podcast today because we're doing all things pediatric and we're just excited to have your expertise and just to chat with you.
Yeah.
So fun.
I'm very excited. Shall we jump into research, because our research does involve your favorite thing, Katherine, which is picky eating.
I'm so excited to hear about this.
Yes.
It's truly my favorite topic.
Well, I'm glad, because I feel like you're going to have a lot to say about the research study that we pulled.
Will.
Yeah. I'm really excited because I currently have no children, for anyone listening who doesn't know. And my type A side likes to be very prepared. So I'm like, this is perfect because now I can start planning that in the future when I have children, if my child is possibly a picky eater, I'm ready to go. Plus also I'll have you have access to you, Katherine.
You have me.
Well, April too. Oh, go ahead.
I feel like one of the reasons I love picky eating so much is because like there's so much concern. Like most parents that I work with are so concerned, and it's something as dietitians that we can like so dive into, which is super fun. And just overall the prevalence and just the frequency of how often I see kiddos with picky eating, it's significant. It's crazy. Wow. So yeah, it's a fun topic.
Yeah. And April, maybe you can even learn a little something for prenatal and before you have kids, because there are some factors that you can do before you even have kids to help with picky eating. And that's what we're going to be talking about.
I'm so excited. Lay it on us, Kelsey. Let's hear it.
All right, ladies and gents and all our friends in between, we are going to be covering a very cool research study. Katherine actually helped me a little bit find this one because I was struggling to find something exactly what I want to talk about. And Katherine was like, hey, by the way, here's something that's pretty interesting. And I was like, you're right, this is pretty interesting. So this week we are covering an article called Picky Eating in Children, Causes and Consequences. It's kind of boring to be honest, but it's a really interesting article.
Real way to introduce it. Well,
well, I mean the title, they really, again, it comes down to like the PubMed, you know, like just, it's not like it's for the lay people. It's for,
I mean, are any research titles interesting? Honestly,
no. I've never read a research paper that it's had a fun title.
I take back my statement. You know, really, that was too harsh of a statement. You're right. I mean, they really aren't very interesting.
Yeah. Come on, April. I've never seen a research article that's had an interesting title, but I have read a lot of interesting research articles.
So this is just like a signal to the research community. If you're listening, just get it together, tighten it up. The titles need to be more interesting.
Yes. Definitely.
I think that would help us as like providers to remember what articles we're referring to. Like I feel like I'll be like, oh, I read this really cool article. I have no idea what the title was. Yeah. So to make it more interesting, we'll like talk about your research more.
Right?
Like exactly. I feel like we're already nerds. Like we're already talking about research. But if you give us a catchy, fun title, we'll be able to be like, oh, that really fun article.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Like we can remember Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. There's no way I'm going to remember, you know, carbohydrate intake while fasting for those with type 1 diabetes. Like, no, I'm not going to. Why would I remember that?
I'm laughing that you brought up Harry Potter because I don't know why I was thinking of Harry Potter too.
It's just a long, hard to say title, but I remember.
Never forget Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
Never forget.
You won't. You can't. All right, bringing it back. By the way, while we're talking about England, this article comes from the Center of Academic Child Health in the UK.
What a segue.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Yeah, so this is a really cool article actually written by Caroline Taylor and Pauline Emmett that kind of just looks at a lot of different studies. So this is what we would call a literature review. It's not quite an analysis because it doesn't do a complete statistical breakdown, but it's a literature review of a lot of different articles that are related to picky eating in children and how those might arise and some consequences later on. So I'm going to start with kind of going into what their overall, idea of picky eating is. And Katherine, feel free to interrupt at any time if you have something to say, or if you disagree with something, let me know.
Mm-hmm. I will.
So, pretty much the first sentence of this article is saying there is not a universally accepted definition of picky eating, and there is not an agreement and a tool to how to even identify it in
Mm-hmm.
kids. And I kind of think that goes on to even having a hard time really identifying what causes it or even how to treat it. Katherine, I'm sure everybody's different, and every kid has different reasons for being picky, and every kid has different solutions to kind of get out of that, huh?
Yeah, and I think what's super interesting, Kelsey, is I know we had to kind of collaborate to even find an article, and I think that one of the reasons why is because we don't even have a definition of what picky eating is.
Yeah.
So I feel like the research can be really, really lacking, especially recent research, because there's not a good definition. And I know this article goes on to kind of talk about RFID a little bit, but we have some very clear diagnoses and criteria for other things. So it's even kind of hard to find research for us as providers.
Yeah.
And another big thing is a definition of picky eating, perception is just huge. I mean, what I think of picky eating as a pediatric provider is probably very different than what you guys think.
Yeah.
And then I could pick two parents out of a room,
Mm-hmm.
a room of people, and they would have completely different ideas of what they feel picky eating is for
sure.
their own concern. So I think that really kind of bleeds into the research, and where it's hard to be able to assess there.
I mean, even the definition that they kind of give us from the research, I quoted it, is those who consume an inadequate variety of foods, the rejection of a substantial amount of foods that are familiar, as well as unfamiliar to them.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that there wasn't, and I guess it's because I didn't really think about it because I'm not immersed in the pediatric realm. I didn't even realize there wasn't a true definition of picky eating. And that kind of brought up a question in my mind, Katherine, and this may not even apply to you just because there is such a screening process for your inpatient work and then possibly for your private practice work. But have you ever run into somebody who maybe thought that their child was a picky eater and you had to let them know, hey, actually your child isn't a picky eater. They just don't like X, Y, and Z. I'm not concerned.
All the time.
Really?
And
okay.
Yeah, all the time. But what I will say though is I as a pediatric dietitian, I'm like a outside consultant. So when I work with parents, they're always the experts. So if there's parental concern, I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's still something that we need to work on. They truly are the experts. So I think parental instinct is huge in our work, but absolutely there's been so many times where it's kind of like the age appropriate picky eating, which I know we'll probably dive into more, where I kind of say, I'm not super concerned, but here's some strategies to reduce the risk of severe picky eating and reduce the risk of prolonging kind of the challenges. But yes, to answer your question, yes.
Yeah.
That's super interesting. I never really thought about that before, but that makes a lot of sense. They are the experts. They're obviously know their child best. But yeah, wow, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So going kind of back into the article, just with the causes that they kind of broke down for picky eating, they looked at it from two different perspectives. I'm going to talk about the one that I not agreed with, but just understood better, and kind of it seemed more organized to me. Katherine, it might not be the same for you, but the way that was more organized to me to be able to put in predictive factors was that they looked at that from 3 distinct phases of time. So they looked at before and during pregnancy can have some factors, early feeding phase. So this is the first year of life. Involves breastfeeding. When you're introducing new foods, that's one of the phases. And the last phase is the second year of life. I would say even second to fourth year of life here. It's just kind of when children are getting more autonomy, they're learning how to feed themselves. And they're also reflecting, that's when kids are sponges. They're also learning all the other things that are going on around them too. And the other way that they organized it was just looking at child-centered factors, parental-centered factors, and then parent-child-centered interaction factors. There's similar factors, but you can just organize them separately. So I'm just going to go in the time way. Mm-hmm. So interesting ones for April, if you want to start thinking about these. I don't know what your timeline is, but anywho. So before and during pregnancy, so picky eating was associated with greater maternal age. April, you got to be careful getting up there.
Oh my gosh.
Just kidding. I'm kidding. You brought up in the first place.
April.
I know.
April.
April, you're 1 year older than me.
I forgot that you were so much younger than me, Kelsey. Katherine's younger than me too.
I'm 25 going on 26.
So funny.
My God. All right. So before and during pregnancy, so picky eating was associated with greater maternal age, maternal smoking, higher maternal social class, which I think is interesting. Lower pre-pregnancy BMI, higher maternal educational attainment, lower parity, and the infant being of lighter birth weight, and for males. Go ahead.
I want to unpack a couple.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Please do.
So we we're talking about this specific study, and I have not read every single study that this research has reviewed. So I think that I could be doing more review, but I want to tell kind of what I see in practice.
Yeah.
So the education level, I think, is super, super interesting, because that goes back to like opinions.
Yeah.
Right. Opinions on picky eating. Are families with a higher education more or less concerned about their kids' nutrition intake, growth, picky eating status? Are those families better or worse understanding what the pediatrician's concerns are? Are families with different education levels not getting the same services and the same care as families with higher education? So I think there's a lot to unpack there, and it could show like maybe some gaps in care that like we as providers need to fill. And also I think it goes back to like, we don't have a definition of a real definition of picky eating. So like two families with two different education levels are going to have two different kind of, I don't want to say opinions, but how they're kind of perceiving how nutrition is going for their kiddo. So I think that's huge. And the next thing I want to unpack, is the low birth weight. Or the lower birth weight. So I'm thinking of like NICU babies when I think of that. And NICU babies have a tough start sometimes with feeding. A lot of them have a tube down their nose or a tube down their mouth. Not all, of course. A lot of them need different respiratory supports that impact feeding. So day one, feeding is more challenging. So that makes more sense to me. But I thought that some of these maternal factors were interesting. And I think some of them may be more important to our care as providers than others.
Yeah, definitely. And something that I'll talk about a little bit later too, but keep in mind that none of these factors alone probably cause picky eating. It's a mixture of a lot of factors. So if you find that like you might be in one of these situations, it's not you, it's not going to be your fault either. A lot of things come and collaborate in causing picky eating. So it's not like, well, have a higher degree, so my kid's going to be a picker eater. Like that's not
right.
100%. And Kelsey, I think I think looking at causes is really interesting for us as providers, but when we think about like treatment approaches and solutions, like how are we going to help these families as providers? I think looking at causes sometimes can change treatment course, but there is absolutely zero reason for families to like play the blame game.
Yeah.
You know, like, I think it was this, I did this wrong, you did that wrong. Not helpful for treatment strategies, which I know we'll go over.
Yeah, definitely
I think
not.
it's super interesting, and like my math-centered brain wants to know numbers, like what percentage, of families with picky eaters have that higher education, what percentage have, a new number of these factors. I'm not seeing any numbers, so it is, that's my math-centered brain really wants more of that. So it's just interesting concepts, and a lot of those things you mentioned, you can't change. It's not like you can say, gosh, I want to take my degree back, or things like that. So I think it's just interesting things to think about.
Yeah, and something to think about too is that even in this study, like for example, the sentence after the infant being lighter birth weight or male, the sentence after says, other studies, however, have found boys and girls have equally been affected. So,
right. And I think so it's important overall just to remember that correlation doesn't necessarily imply causation, which is just a great fallback.
And different studies will reflect other studies too. So even when you've got those numbers,
I feel like it's so important to remember that, because it's very easy to imply that because something is correlating with something else that it means that it's causing it, and necessarily isn't.
Definitely. So going on to the next area, the next section, I guess, time period, where you can kind of see some causation or predict some picky eating is early feeding. So that's that first year of life. And there's 3 different things that they've noticed can be related to picky eating in those kids. So the first one is sucking pattern. I honestly don't know very much about breastfeeding sucking patterns. Katherine, you might be able to jump in here a little bit.
Yeah, so sucking patterns, I will say, is not my total area of expertise, because our speech language pathologists are the experts. So whenever I'm worried about like the suck, swallow, breathe pattern, I'm always like pediatric SLP, because there are swallowing experts. But to kind of give a summary, it's the pattern of the sucking, the swallowing, and the breathing. And if those kind of cycle patterns are not functioning well, it can be really, really tricky for babies to feed. So often when we notice breastfeeding challenges or bottle feeding challenges, it can be like the coordination of the suck, swallow, breathe. And if they're having trouble coordinating, they may not be growing. They may be more fussy, more gassy. There can be many issues with that coordination, which should be mostly instinctual.
Huh. That is, I didn't even know that. That's awesome. That's really interesting.
But like I said, if anyone listening has a concern or wants more information, pediatric SLPs are amazing. I'm a dietitian, so that's not quite my area of expertise. So that's kind of the dumbed down version.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And for those of you who don't know, SLP is a speech language pathologist.
Yeah.
Thank you, April. Pediatric speech language pathologist.
Cool. Okay, cool. And then, the other 2 are reduced duration of breastfeeding and then late introduction of complementary feeding. So that reduced duration of breastfeeding, I'm assuming, is time spent like over months breastfeeding. And then late introduction of complementary feeding, which Katherine, I'm sure you know a lot more about, but what I know at least is as children are kind of transitioning from breastfeeding to eating, real food, having that complementary food to learn how to eat, really, to get used to having food on their plates, in their mouth, feeling it, just learning those feelings in your mouth and how to use your mouth to eat. That's kind of where that complementary feeding goes in.
Yeah, and I love the way that you're using the word complementary. I think that's really important. I think when we think about the word weaning, we think that like breast milk and formula have to wean, but really, I love the term complementary, because like the food is complementing the current intake.
Yeah.
And I think that makes it seem less overwhelming, which can help families expose more often and earlier, which can help with picky eating.
Yeah. Very cool. I think this is all super interesting.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that complementary feeding could help with picky eating.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's an area where often we can see feeding difficulties and challenges, maybe little ones who are gagging more often than they should, because gagging is appropriate. Little ones who aren't transitioning from like a puree over to more of a lumpy food. Little ones who are worried about purees and will only eat crunchy foods. There's some challenges that we can notice there that can transfer on later in life.
Super cool.
Yeah. And then, that last group of children, 2 to 4 year olds about, there was the most interesting thing that I pulled was that maternal healthy eating was associated with a lower prevalence of picky eating in children, which I don't quite know how they were identifying or defining healthy eating. So I think that one can kind of be a little tricky, but just, it's just showing that the maternal habits can have effect on kids in that age group. Again, like I said, kids are such sponges, so they're just taking in everything around them. Another thing that I noted from the article was maternal pressure to eat, and that same study was associated with picky eating, and it was mediated by concern about the child being underweight. So, almost having that stress as a mom to say, you have to eat, can cause the picky eating later on.
That's understandable.
And that's what I see every day. Because it's so stressful. I work with so many families that are extremely stressed, understandably so. Are they getting enough vitamins, minerals? Are they growing? Are their brains developing? Are they getting enough nutrients to grow linearly? Like all of these things. And it's super, super stressful. And I see that stress can carry over to mealtime behaviors.
Yeah, that's understandable. Having someone stand over you and, obviously they're coming from a place of love and care, but I can understand how that stress would, also stress the child out. And to your point about the healthy eating, Kelsey, and how we don't really know the parameters of that, just, that is one of the things with literature reviews. I feel like they're nice in a sense because they can compile information, but then we don't have those, those little details. What were they determining as what is healthy eating? Because that is such a broad term as well.
Okay, so that kind of covers all of the causes they've identified from that study. I'm going to also go through just some of the consequences that they talked about. So looking at a short-term consequences, more so, in developing children, what picky eating can lead to. So the primary consequence of picky eating that was found is just that it has an effect on dietary intake, and it can cause some adverse health and development outcomes. So a lot of studies reported that energy intakes in picky children can be lower than non-picky children, but also there were some studies that said energy intakes in picky children were the same as non-picky children. And there was an adequate comparison in different daily intakes of micronutrients and macronutrients as well. However, it really depends. Some studies have said, yes, they eat just enough, or some studies said, no, they don't eat enough. Another study said that they even have higher energy intake than non-picky eaters due to high intake of energy-dense foods like what they've said, it's an English article, it's confectionery and savory snacks. So there's a lot of different opinions here.
Yeah. I guess I would just say I like to look when I'm working in pediatrics, I like to look at the risk of things. So like, is this 2-year-old, is this like age appropriately picky 2-year-old at risk for inadequate energy intake?
Yeah.
Or at, overall nutrition intake, because then of course they're at risk for not growing weight wise or linearly. They're at risk for not getting enough brain development. So I mean, I think there's it's hard to tell. And I think the research is telling us that it's hard to tell.
Yeah.
So many 2-year-olds, it's like breakfast will be like the best meal they've ever had, and dinner will be like they threw it on the ceiling.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's probably what the research is showing. So I like to think about like, what is the risk, and
Yeah.
and what could be the consequences from the risk when I'm working with families.
For a
Definitely.
said individual child.
Yeah.
Yes, for each individual child.
Yeah.
What was
Would
most interesting to me, and I think I would have a lot of concern as a parent, is the future. You know, because my child is a picky eater now, does that mean in the future they're going to have, you know, be more predisposed to comorbidities and things like that? And I think almost being in healthcare makes you think about those things more, maybe. I don't know. Or I know too much, but that would be one of my concerns. And you did mention that, Kelsey, but again, it was kind of wishy-washy. You know, it could be connected to that poor health as an adult, but it could not be connected to that. It doesn't necessarily mean it will happen, you know?
Yeah. Katherine, would you mind just kind of giving a brief rundown of like age appropriate pickiness?
Yeah. So things that I'm thinking about with age appropriate pickiness is like kind of overall just general. I love the word fussy.
Yeah.
Fussiness around food. So like one day apples are the best, and then the next day apples are like there's like tears. I don't want to eat apples. New foods are, you know, toddlers around this age with new foods are more hesitant. They may be willing to kind of work towards the food and maybe potentially try the food, but there's definitely some hesitation there. And overall intake is just super hit or miss. So like I said, you know, breakfast may be like amazing, and then dinner super tricky. Kids may prefer snack foods because they're super yummy, and they're easier to eat from a sensory standpoint. Those are the things that are mostly age appropriate. And when I screen for things that are a little bit less age appropriate, I'm thinking about like foods that were previously accepted are getting dropped. Like tons of foods are getting dropped. Kids are not eating an entire food group. So absolutely no protein sources, or absolutely no fruit sources. Total refusal of meals worry me. And then kind of like big behaviors around meals. So, you know, the meltdowns and kind of like throwing food can be age appropriate, but more when kids are getting extremely upset around food, that's when it starts to be less age appropriate, and more like, are we getting into a kind of a picky eating area that's more significant?
Yeah. Interesting.
I just thought of a question for you, but I'm going to hold on to it until our Q&A section.
Ooh, I like it. So yeah, just to round it up, in April, that's kind of what you're talking about as well. But for later in life, just a couple things that they identified. Again, just related to picky eating. Again, lots of studies, lots of different outcomes, but there were a few outcomes related to picky eaters later in life that are underweight and their long-term in adult life. Also, picky eating has been identified as a risk factor for anorexia nervosa in one study, although another study later on looked at anorexia and bulimia, and it wasn't associated. Again, yes, no, maybe. But it also did go into saying, you know, adult picky eating can occur and can be, you know, taken on from early life. And it can go into some distress and social impairment. The basis of some of that adult picky eating can be associated with parental feeding practices in childhood, with that pressure to eat again. And then just having that picky eating and having a higher disgust sensitivity, and just having one adverse food event. Before I know that Katherine, you probably have something to say about it, but I do have an example of this actually. I worked with a client when I was working at an eating disorder clinic as well. And I had a client, and it was really interesting too, because it was a 16-year-old boy who had an adverse food event a few years younger, and he had choked, and he only ate liquids for years after that because he was so terrified of choking again. And yeah, and he was at an eating disorder clinic because we were teaching him not how to eat, how to, get rid of that food of or fear of eating, but it's the fear of eating. You know what I mean? Like it was so interesting to have a different development, because usually with eating disorders you think, okay, it's the control issue, it's all about, you know, weight, things like that, but no, it was actually a feeding disorder, which I thought was super interesting.
I feel like I have a million comments, but I'll try to be brief.
Yeah.
So I think that's when we start to really, especially when we're looking at like length of picky eating, and when picky eating isn't resolving at an age appropriate time, and then when we're looking into diagnostic criteria for ARFID, which dietitians do not diagnose eating disorders.
Well, sorry, will you break down ARFID quickly?
So ARFID stands for Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder, and ARFID is really when picky eating has kind of taken a new life on itself. ARFID is in the DSM-5, which is the kind of diagnostic area for eating disorders and feeding disorders. Mm-hmm. So we've talked a lot about today with, you know, picky eating, but I think when we're thinking about the more lifelong challenges and the prolonged challenges, kids that were picky at 2 but are still, you know, very selective or still having challenges at age 14, that's when not dietitians, but maybe you know, the psychiatric field can work on a diagnosis there. Yeah. Yes, I think it's an interesting point that this article kind of starts to dive into as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost ARFID is like that transition point between picky eating into maybe disordered eating.
Correct. And that's often I've seen in practice a very kind of blurry area. And like I said, you know, we're not trained as dietitians. We screen, we monitor, we do all of this types of care, but we do not make diagnoses. But I've seen where, you know, is this really picky eating, or is it really kind of transitioning over to more of an ARFID picture? And that's when we ask our psychologists, you know, to help us out with diagnosing things.
Yeah, interesting. Well, thank you so much for all of your input, Katherine.
Yeah.
You really kind of gave us a lot of new information and just made that article a little bit more colorful, to be honest. So thank you.
I know your insight into the world of picky eating.
We talked about like picky eating and we talked about consequences,
mm-hmm.
but there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
We do see challenges and we see so many, you know, concerns with picky eating, but there's so many treatment strategies. There's so many kiddos that, with little bits of work with different medical specialties, can really work through picky eating quickly, swiftly, before we have these lifelong concerns. So there's strategies, there's tons of things that we can do. So work with a pediatric dietitian near you.
Yeah. What's the name of your private practice, Katherine?
It's Katherine Sayre Nutrition.
There you go. If you're looking for someone.
Yeah. And we'll have you plug yourself at the end of the episode. And for anyone who's listening, who's interested in checking Katherine out or reaching out to her, we're going to put all of her information in the episode bio. So you'll have it to access in case you're driving and can't write down what she says, or you want to go back and look for it later.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. Shall we jump into the recipe, April?
I think that we shall. All right. Time for the recipe segment. I am very excited about this one. There's a little bit of backstory, as there usually is with all of our recipes, but do either of you have Costco memberships? Kelsey, I know it's a little more difficult for you because you're like a world traveler.
I don't have a membership to any place that does have brick and mortar.
Fair.
I also do not, but it's more because we used to use my fiance's family membership, and I think we lost our card, so we just need to get back onto the family membership. So TBD, because I really miss their samples.
Yes.
I'm glad you brought that up. So I don't know if either of you share the same love of Costco that I have, but one of those parts of the pieces that made up my love for Costco were the samples. And what died with COVID and the start of COVID were the Costco samples. Moment of silence. I literally have talked to people who have said they've gone to Costco during lunchtime and just eaten the samples as their lunch.
I've actually, that used to be a Saturday activity. We would like go and eat Costco samples. Yeah.
So I've never done that for like a full meal, but it certainly was something I look forward to. Now that the pandemic is kind of, touch and go, it ebbs and flows and, all that fun stuff, I see sprinkles of the old Costco. So, but it doesn't happen very often. The other day I was in Costco and they were handing out samples that day and I was so excited. I was jazzed. I was like, yes, I can walk around. I can eat my samples. I'm so excited for the little cups and the mini utensils. This is great. And I was in more of like the dried food aisle section and they were giving out samples of mac and cheese. And it was so good. I was very excited. So I ate the sample. I love the sample. So then, of course, I decided to buy the sample. So it was mac and cheese boxes, which I haven't bought in like, I don't know how long. I don't know why. I just never really thought about mac and cheese. I think I just forgot about it. So it's this mac, and I really like the brand too, because, as an intuitive eater and as a dietitian who promotes food freedom, I wholeheartedly believe you can eat anything, but I personally do feel better if I eat things that are made up with ingredients that I can recognize. So I was really excited about the brand because I was reading through all the ingredients. It was things that I could recognize. I was like, this is awesome. And I bought like the 12 or 24 pack or whatever the heck they had there because hello, it's Costco. So I brought it home and of course I was immediately in the mood for a box of mac and cheese. So I made it, but in my true form. It's like, I don't just want mac and cheese. I want to zhuzh it up a little bit. So, and therein was born my fancy mac and cheese. And that's what we're going to be talking about today.
I'm so excited.
And moment of silence too, because we have now since finished all of the mac and cheese boxes and I need to go
all
back
of them.
and get more. It's been a meal that we've been eating regularly, and every time we have friends over, we eat it. We're like, what are we gonna make for dinner? And we're like, well, we have mac and cheese. Mac and cheese.
I love that.
So, the great thing about the package is it was like a variety pack. So they had different noodle shapes, different cheese sauces, like more of the cheddar orangey ones, and then more of like the white cheddar one. So this particular one was white cheddar, and I actually liked both. I don't know if either of you are really affected by like the visuals of your food, and to me, I thought that the fancy mac and cheese I was making, visually, the white cheddar sauce looked better with the ingredients. So I chose the white cheddar sauce with the shell mac and cheese in case you're interested, but this could be, what you want it to be. It doesn't have to be the shell mac and cheese. It could be, the little tubes, and it could be the, the regular cheddar. So it was white cheddar mac and cheese with the shells. And I sauteed up some spinach and some mushrooms. And I already had some grilled chicken that I had made for the week that I just chopped up. I made mac and cheese, and I literally just mixed in the sauteed veggies and the chicken in with the mac and cheese. And it was so good. It just kind of gave the mac and cheese a little more like beef, because one box of that particular mac and cheese is only around like 300 calories or so, which is not enough for one meal in my book. So I needed to add a lot more calories to it. So anyways, it was amazing. I call it my fancy mac and cheese. Although I'm sure I'm not the first person to figure out that you should be doing that, but this can really, it can really be whatever you want to make it. You don't have to do mushrooms and spinach. You could do any veggies of your choice, which I think is the fun part, whatever's in your pantry. So that's my fancy mac and cheese.
April, you are giving me flashbacks to me in college. I used to call this the poor nutrition student's meal, and I would get the cans of tuna, and I would get the microwavable rice. I would heat the rice, put tuna in it, get Mexican blend cheese, and sprinkle it on top, and then get like a pack of pre-cut vegetables from like Trader Joe's or something, or I would cut up a bunch myself, and I would just like throw red onion and like peppers in it, and I'd mix it up, and that would be my lunch for like 2 weeks.
That's such a college thing to do.
Oh my god. I can't believe I ate that so much.
So funny.
Oh my gosh. And I feel like this is doable for kids. Do you think that this would be like a kid-friendly yum meal?
Yeah, 100%. So first off, it's so funny because I talk to clients all day, And so I noticed that I end up having like cravings or desires for food that I talk about during the day. So mac and cheese and dino nuggets are a household like staple. Like I have to have mac and cheese. I'm talking about it now, and like I'm probably going to go make mac and cheese after this. So okay, a couple of things, because I can only imagine there's families listening that either have kids that are picky, or they're listening to this thinking like, how can I prevent this? Like, how can I work to make sure that my kids aren't picky? So April, wow, I love that Costco does the different cheeses and the different noodle shapes, because what I like to do with toddlers specifically, and older kids as well, is I like to take a preferred food and change it really, really slightly. It's a slight change for us as adults and a big change for kids. So noodle shape is like the perfect example. Going from tubes to shells to I have like pirate shapes. I think I have cars maybe in my cabinet right now. So like different shapes. Doing that shows to a picky eater or to a toddler, like my preferred food might look different sometimes. Like it might not just be the same every single time. So doing those little switches can prevent picky eating and work to help kids gain more food. So I can't believe that Costco does like a big thing of different noodles. That's like game changing in the picky eating world. I'm going to send all the parents that I work with to Costco.
That's super cool.
Super cool. And I will say too, mixed foods for toddlers can be really, really tricky. I feel like there's probably a lot of parents that are listening like, how am I ever going to get my kid to eat something that's mixed? So what I would probably recommend is when the mac and cheese is cooking, taking out a tiny bowl of the mac and cheese that's kind of ready and prepared and all set for little one, and then doing some of the veggies and the protein on the side of the plate, and maybe doing a little bit of the cheese sauce over the meat and the veggies. I know that would prevent less of a battle at the meal, and we can work up to the mixing of the foods so that parents can have the fancy, yummy mac and cheese. Toddlers can benefit from all of the things that are there, but also there's not like mushrooms on the ceiling because food was thrown.
That's super interesting. I think I would never think that changing just the noodle shape would be that big of a deal, but it really just makes me think of, Kelsey and I work with adults. It makes me think of when I work with adults and I tell them, small, consistent changes, let's start small. And of course, like, adults aren't presumably throwing mushrooms on the ceiling or noodles on the ceiling, but it is kind of like, not the adults I work with. My clients are amazing, but it really just goes to show that those small changes are really like the things to work for. And I love how you said put the cheese sauce on the chicken and the mushrooms. It's almost like mixing it a little bit or showing them that the flavors can be mixed. I guess that's super cool. And I love it, the meal too, because it sounds like from what you're saying, it really can be one meal that you make that everyone can eat, which I know growing up, there were 6 of us in the house and my mom refused to make more than one meal. She was like, you're eating what you're getting. I'm not making another meal, which is understandable.
Yeah. And I mean, we know that offering multiple meals and offering backups and doing different meals can increase picky eating. I believe the article talked a little bit about that. So, I mean, trying to really make one meal work for your family is huge. And I think that the fancy mac and cheese is an awesome way to do it.
Yeah. And something too that's interesting, just in your other kind of wheelhouse, Katherine, as well, is just with my experience working with eating disorders, mixed meals, not sandwiches, no go. Taco night was always a shit show. like mixed foods are not gonna work for eating disorders as well. So it's just interesting kind of how, Katherine, I bet you know this as well, just like kind of how the things you wouldn't think about, those small adjustments to a meal can work for a lot of different people, a lot of different needs too.
Yeah. And I mean, with picky eaters and, adolescents that are struggling with eating disorders, we can make small, little, tiny changes to work up to a mixed meal, because that seems really scary and it seems like a lot. So, I mean, like doing the cheese sauce over, or having having kids dunk the mushroom into the mac and cheese. I mean, we can work on those small little changes, April, like you said, to get to that place. But I noticed that things like taco night, the fancy mac and cheese, lasagna, certain pasta dishes can be really tricky. So I like to work on deconstructing and then working to get it all together with kids and with teens as well.
Maybe we should just start taking toddlers to really fancy modern restaurants and they can get deconstructed everything.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's so true. Well, yeah, so that's my recipe of the week. And now I'm really upset that I didn't plan further in advance and buy more mac and cheese since I knew I was going to be talking about this, because now I really want it for my dinner. So I guess I'll just go have the turkey burgers like I planned, but it is what it is.
Sounds so delish. All right. So Katherine, we're about to interview you with a lot of Q&A. As if we haven't done that enough.
I'll do my best.
All right, everybody. Let's jump
Q&A.
into our Q&A segment. So all of these questions are really directed at you, Katherine, but of course, because we can't help ourselves, Kelsey and I will jump in and give our...
I don't know what you're talking about, April. I am so quiet.
Okay,
first question is, how do I adapt foods for both me and my kids so I don't have to make separate meals?
I love that question. So I think we started to kind of address this with talking about deconstructed meals. So lots and lots of adult meals are like everything's mixed together. There's like sauces. So I like to think about that from like a sensory standpoint. Like think about eating like a sushi roll that has like the crunchy crispy and the little fish eggs on it. Like when you put it in your mouth, there's going to be like little tiny fish eggs that are popping and like something that's crunchy, and like the rice is kind of soggy, and then the seaweed you have to like really chew through. Like that sensory experience is like challenging. It's tricky. So I like to think about how can we make this easier for a picky eater? How can we deconstruct tacos and let little ones who are picky construct them on their own to make interest? Can we do? I know it's sad for an adult. I wouldn't want to eat plain pasta, but maybe like a plain pasta with butter and then the sauce on the side with the meat in it. Can they dip? Can we deconstruct things? I find that can be super, super helpful. Even if your kids are older or if kids are younger, I like to make sure that there's always, always, always a safe or preferred food on the plate. So there's always something, whether it's a roll, strawberries, pasta, just one thing that's 100% safe for every person in the family. Then, if you're offering a new or a non-preferred food and that is refused or it doesn't go super well, little ones can have that preferred food and it's still one family meal. It just, you're kind of giving some balance there, doing a preferred and a non-preferred to make the meal more successful.
That leads me to a question. So what if you put, a plate down in front of your toddler and it has a preferred food, a safe food on there, and then it has one new food, and the toddler just is not having it with the new food? What is your strategy, or what do you suggest? Do you suggest encouraging them to try it, or just kind of letting it be? Being like, listen, if they don't want it, no problem. I'll just keep reintroducing it until they try it. Yeah, or how about both?
Yeah, good question. So I would start, because I'm wearing my dietitian hat. So I'm thinking like, how is the meal going, and how much are the kids or are the little ones not tolerating? Like, is there like screaming, crying, upset, like trying to climb out of the high chair, or are they more just kind of, I don't really want to touch it, kind of a deal? If it's the screaming, crying, upset, it's a big feelings. I like to say big feelings. It might not be a good time to work on a food exposure, but if it's more of kind of a, that looks wet and sticky and I don't really want to touch it, what I like to recommend is doing small little food exposures, which could include a parent or guardian picking up, I'll just use broccoli as an example, picking up the broccoli and saying, oh, this looks like a tree, like bringing over the broccoli to the window and saying, does this look like the tree outside? and having the toddler just simply touch it can be a step. I do not recommend parents encouraging bites. We have research to support it's not helpful. Just try a bite is just not helpful. There's not research to support it, but going down kind of a food hierarchy of exposure. So like touching, smelling, can you lick the food? Can you put the blueberries in a line from smallest to biggest? Those types of things I do like to encourage, as long as kids are tolerating the meal and like tolerating the time, the exposure.
That is really interesting and just good to know in general, because I think anyone's natural instinct is just to be like, oh, just try a bite, like just try it, because we know it's safe, we know it's good for them, whatever, and like we know that it'll be fine, but they don't know. And I think it's a lot of this, from what I've learned so far, is almost just like putting yourself in the mind of the child, which I think obviously as adults we're so far removed from that time period in our lives, it's hard to do. Like I was so taken aback that you did say that small change between the noodle shape was even a big change. So that's really interesting.
Maybe that's why I do pediatrics. Maybe I just think like kids and I don't think like adults.
It's more, you naturally go, I think.
This is my key to success. April just figured out my entire life.
Just a big kid at heart. But that's super interesting. Okay, next question. What are your top tips for dealing with a picky eater?
I love it. Does anyone want to weigh in before I weigh in?
I have one thing that I've learned during my like nutrition throughout the life cycle class that I learned that we should do. You tell me if this is still the truth, because again, I know that it's always changing too. So I learned this in 2017.
Great.
So at the time, it was repeated exposure to meals. So if a child denies a meal, packing it up and trying again with that same meal, or with repeated exposure to the same food. So if you have made a meal, or you made something with like broccoli, for example, they deny the broccoli, you try broccoli again, So having that repeated exposure to the food will kind of get them more familiar with it, and hopefully, start to accept it.
Yeah, that's kind of what my baseline knowledge has been too, Kelsey. Just going through just a few classes, because I'm not focused on pediatric, is that it's suggested that repeated exposure, don't give up just because the first time you put Brussels sprouts in front of them, they say yuck and they don't want to try it. Try again.
Yeah,
100%. And there's still great research to support that. Research, and of course anecdotal and in practice. Ongoing, just repeated over and over and over exposures. In the literature, I've seen kind of the age appropriate picky eating. They note that kids likely need to be exposed 15 to 20 times before they might accept something. So that is offering broccoli 15 times before they might actually like get ready to try it. And for, we don't have a definition for mild, moderate, severe picky eating. But, with cases that are a little bit different than the age appropriate, it's likely going to take 20 plus times. So just so families don't get bored of offering broccoli 80,000 million times, I like to try to recommend like offering it in different ways. Like, can you air fry it? Can you bake it? Can you do it raw? Can you do ranch, blue cheese, taco seasoning to spice it up for the whole family? And then we learn like what toddlers like flavor wise. So no, I think that those are awesome comments for reducing the risk of picky eating and also getting through picky eating for strategies. Okay, so top recommendations. I'll try to do like 3 to 5. So one of the biggest things is having a pretty consistent meal and snack structure. So 3 meals, typically 3 snacks, 2 to 3 snacks can be appropriate based on age, that are around the same time. And those meals should really look like little ones are sitting, they're at the table, there's not distractions, they're not playing, there's not a TV or a tablet, and they are self-feeding, so they're not being fed by an adult. this is, of course, in a perfect world. Like, sometimes you're going to an appointment and, kids have to eat during appointments, and sometimes there has to be a tablet, things happen, but that's kind of the majority. Next is the exposures. I would say would probably be the next biggest thing. Just ongoing exposures with different things. Then I have a lot of families who say, okay, I've given broccoli 100 times. They still won't eat it. Like, what do I do now? That's when I really like to start going through that kind of food hierarchy that I've started to talk about, is having those exposures and having them be a little bit more structured. I like to think about at least one food exposure per day. Kids have to work on tolerating a food being in front of them before they can touch it. And then they might need to work on smelling it, then bringing it closer to the mouth. So nose is kind of close to the mouth, and then bringing it close to the mouth and doing things like licking a food or kissing a food. And then finally doing things like making a bite mark in a food. So I think about like a cucumber. Like, can you make a bite mark? Be a dinosaur and make a bite mark? And then that's it. That's the food exposure. So for all of the foods that with these ongoing exposures going down that kind of line there, helps kids like naturally get more comfortable and just play with their food. So there's not like a take a bite, try it, work on it. Like that imaginary play is really helpful. And then lastly, taking preferred foods that kids already do well with, and making those small, tiny changes that we started to talk about. That can play into food chaining, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. Hit up my Instagram because I have lots of posts. But that goes from a preferred food with little tiny changes to a new food. And I find great success with that in practice. And there's great research to support it.
I love all of that. While you were talking, it really got me thinking how much of an effect, I grew up with 3 other siblings. There's like chaos in the house. There's other things going on. If you have a picky eater and you're trying to expose them to a food, how much of an effect does siblings or other people in the room have on that picky eater? Like, say, for example, if the sibling sits down and says, ew, I don't like X, Y, and Z, and maybe the sibling isn't a picky eater, they're just being difficult maybe at the time. How much of an effect does that have on the picky eater? Or does it really just vary depending on the family and the child?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. And I'd actually like to dive into the research on that to see if we have more studies. What I can say that I see in practice is it's super mixed. I had a video call the other day with a family with a pretty significant picky eater that's kind of beyond age appropriate. And they were having a kind of some mealtime distress on the call. And the younger sibling was sitting right next to them, just chowing down. Having a fabulous time, like not listening to anything. So I think that there's some families where there's not a huge kind of disruption. I do see often though with older siblings, kind of the behaviors rub off on younger siblings. So those are negative things, but there's also positive things with siblings and with parents. Like the modeling is huge. So typically when I have a family with multiple kids and one kiddo that's kind of identified as the fussy or the selective eater, how can we all work on the food plate together? Like how can we do like a full family game and everybody models the food interactions, and that is very successful. So I think there's like some negative kind of things, but some also positive things.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
It always makes me, when we think about something, when we talk about this, it makes me think about growing up. Like we used to eat yogurt all the time. Like we ate it all the time. It was part of, everyday life. And I found out in college that my mom hates yogurt, and I never knew. And she told us when I was in college, so like 20 years old, she's like, yeah, I hate yogurt. And I was like, what? Since when? She goes, yeah, I just never said anything because I didn't want you guys to hate it. Like I wanted you to eat it and not be affected by my hatred for yogurt. So that's always stuck in my mind, really how much of an effect I know there's a huge effect on what we do as parents. I say we, I'm not a parent. On what parents do and how they affect their children. Yeah. It's late at night. I'm messing my words. I know there's a huge effect that parents have and what they do on. Wow. I know what parents do and say has a huge effect on their children. It would just be interesting to see, you know, how that applies directly related to food. But I know it's probably one of those things that's just like you said, is so different for every family and every person. So that's super interesting.
It's interesting though, because like that modeling, like that positive modeling that your mom did, like affected you, and you didn't even notice or know until college. I mean, that's literally that's interesting.
No, at that moment in time, I was like my life was racing in my head. I was like, have I ever seen her eat yogurt? Like, how did I never
I've never noticed
never think about it. So it was
fun fact, I don't like yogurt.
Oh, you don't like yogurt?
I love yogurt.
I like the idea of yogurt, and sometimes I'll buy it because I really want to try new flavors, but the texture it's very challenging for me and it makes me gag. However,
understandable.
Cottage cheese is one of my favorite foods.
So you can do cottage cheese, but not yogurt.
Yes.
Most of the time I hear people say that cottage cheese is the issue for them.
That's I'm a new cottage cheese liker, long time yogurt lover.
I'm still working on my food. I'm working on my food interactions with yogurt, and I'm up to the licking kind of stage. I'm getting there. So any of my parents with picky eaters, I'll work on it with you.
Yeah. Really are. You're getting into the mind of a child. You're there.
Okay, our next question is, how do I get my child to eat more?
This is a really good question. And I would say that it's multifaceted. So my simple answer is that you don't. And I don't think that that's probably the answer that this individual is looking for. But the reason I say that is because, and this should have been probably one of my top tips for picky eating, but have you guys heard of the division of responsibility?
No.
Not I mean, like I've heard of division of responsibility, but not as it pertains specifically to picky eating, no.
Yeah.
Amazing. So it's very heavily researched, and I do typically follow the division of responsibility for the vast majority of my patients. And the principle behind it, and Ellen Zatter is the provider who kind of came up with the approach, and her website is amazing. Feel free to visit it. But the kind of whole basis of the approach is that the adult or the caregiver or the guardian decides what is offered, when it's offered, and where it's offered. So they come up with like, okay, so tonight it's fancy mac and cheese for dinner. Dinner's going to be ready by 7. We're all going to sit down at the table. There's not going to be any distractions. So those decisions are made by the adult. But once the fancy mac and cheese or the plate is provided to the child, the toddler, the teen, it is 100% their responsibility to decide if they're going to eat at all, and also how much they're going to eat. So my answer is we can't make kids eat more because we have research to support that it will impact picky eating, and it will likely cause mealtime stress, mealtime pressure. We see pushback, we see fights, we see battles, and we see more picky eating when the division of responsibility is kind of off. So I'm thinking of a follow-up question of a parent, that I would work with. Okay, well, they're not growing though. So what do I do? Then I'm thinking I would likely work on adding to snacks and making snacks look more like mini meals, and working on high calorie strategies. How can we get more nutrition in to what kids are currently eating? Because I cannot ask a toddler to eat 17 waffles for breakfast. Like I just can't do it. But I could maybe ask a parent to offer like a waffle with peanut butter and hemp hearts and banana. So it's really that we as the adults decide to kind of change up the offering, but we cannot have kids eat more.
That makes a lot of sense. It really does. Yeah. And I think that really just puts to rest the whole clean plate club situation.
100%.
Yeah, definitely. Now that you've gone over it, I have heard that before. Just that, the parent deciding what's going on the plate, when you're going to be eating, where you're going to be eating, kids saying, okay, I eat what I want from the plate, how much I want from the plate, and if I'm going to eat from the plate.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's something that when we talk about it, it sounds like common sense.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at like the breakdown of a mealtime with a toddler, mealtimes with toddlers are like not a breath of fresh air sometimes.
Yeah.
Like they're not easy. So I think when we think about that approach and we really work on applying it, we see success.
Yeah.
We definitely see success. And I will say, under pressure, when kids are feeling pressure and they're stressed around mealtimes, they're not going to eat as much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we need to kind of relieve the pressure, and they will help eat more.
It really just makes me sit here and think, like, if I had a meal in front of me and someone looked at me and kept saying, take a bite, eat, 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 I'd be like, whoa.
No.
No.
Yeah. And then, I mean, especially if you have like a toddler brain, you might think if somebody does that with, I don't know, a hot dog, you might think the next time that you have a hot dog on your plate that there might be pressure again. So you might start to have kind of an association with that food and the pressure.
Understandable. All right. Our last question of the Q&A. How should I respond if my child makes a face or says something like ew when they encounter a specific food?
Definitely depends on the age. So I'll kind of dive into toddlers because I think we've talked mostly about toddlers and like the preschool kind of age. I try to redirect as much as I can and kind of say, yucky, huh? Mine's not yucky. You know, my blueberry's sour or my blueberry's sweet. So trying to go over like almost kind of like a food scientist, like the textures and the properties or the color. My blueberry's not yucky. My blueberry's blue. What color is your blueberry? And kind of trying to redirect there. And faces can be deceiving in kids, especially the like younger toddlers, the 12 months to 24. Yeah, I'm sorry, 12 to 24, so a year to 2 years. They're still trying to figure out textures and sensory properties. So think about, like, I know I just used blueberry as an example, but putting a blueberry in your mouth and it's sour, like, I know the other day I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
I made a face, and it's not that I didn't like the blueberry. It was just kind of a shocking experience.
It makes you, yeah.
So I think faces while eating can be deceiving, but really we need to kind of redirect and have kids discuss the properties of food and encourage the food play to redirect there.
Yeah.
It's
funny that you kind of take that because even as that transitions into adults, I feel like I'm doing that even now, but it's different. It's not yucky and yum where I always, whenever people say that looks gross, I say, don't yuck my yum. I figured it out, April. I know we were talking about recently.
Always.
But it's funny that now as I'm working with adults, instead of saying, ooh, this looks yuck, I hear, this is so bad or this is so good. And I feel like I'm in the same position, but now I'm redirecting going, it's not bad. It's just food. It's not bad. It's delicious. It's not unhealthy. It's sweet. You know, like even now as adults, I feel like, you know, we're always we're working towards redirecting those words that don't actually have to be related to food and instead changing it to food can just be taste. Food can just be,
cold.
Cold, a temperature. Food can just be what it is without having to have almost like a personality trait, you know?
100%. Yeah. I think we can tie it into adults too.
Definitely.
And the ways that we as providers like redirect and kind of help adults rethink food, which you know is not my area of expertise, but we have to kind of help toddlers rethink their idea.
Yeah. So interesting.
That's super cool. Well, I feel like my brain is going to explode with the amount of information I have learned today. Katherine, thank you so much. I appreciate your expertise, and I'm so glad you came on today.
Yes.
Can you please plug yourself for anyone who's interested in working with you, how to work with you, how to reach out to you? And again, we're going to put all of the information in the bio so that, you know, if you're driving right now, can't write down your information, no worries. Just look in the description of the episode and you'll have all of your information there. We'll also post our information on our Instagram page, so you'll have it there as well.
Awesome. Thank you. First off, thank you guys so much for having me. Like I said, this is my first podcast. I was a little nervous. I'm feeling ready. I'm ready to do another podcast. I loved it.
Yay.
So to find me, so I run a virtual private practice, and I work with really age 0 to about 24 is kind of my age range. And I see patients one-on-one and in group settings for my private practice. My private practice is called Katherine, Sayre Nutrition. My website, which is where you can find, like pricing information, booking sessions, information about me, my kind of credentials and expertise, is katherinesayrenutrition.com. And my Instagram is I always have to draw the @ sign, pediatric nutritionist. And you can always DM me there if you have questions or concerns. And that is kind of where I give out information as well.
And Katherine, you offer a free kind of discovery call or chance to just chat with you prior to someone signing on with you, right?
Absolutely. So through my website, you can, and through my website, and actually through my link on Instagram as well, you can schedule a discovery call. I think it's extra important for families, because most families have multiple people involved. It's not just the patient or the client. So I think it's important that families are able to have an opportunity to talk to me, kind of see if I'm the right fit for their family. Not every dietitian is the right fit. So it's kind of almost like it's like a quick 15-20 minute conversation where you can just feel it out. Am I a good fit? Can I create some solutions for your family? So yes, of course, I do offer a discovery call.
Awesome. Well,
amazing. Thank you so much, Katherine. It's been so fun to have you on. I've learned so much, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you so much.
Thank you guys. You're the best.
Well,
you're the best.
As always, everyone, thanks so much for listening as well. And please, please, please comment, review, like, subscribe, follow, download, all the things. We really, really appreciate it. It really helps us out. And I think that's it. We will be talking to you soon.
Yes, we'll see you and talk to you guys next week. Thank you so much, Katherine. Love you. We appreciate you. And go check her out on Instagram at Pediatric Nutritionist.
Yes. Yes, please.
Talk to you guys.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.